Hello and welcome back to AIM In Practice, where I have the pleasure of sitting down with practitioners, experts, and authors to explore their unique journeys and insights in this multifaceted world of wellness. I'm Jess Reynolds, your host, and today we are joined by Nikki Nicholas, a talented and inspirational transformation life coach.
I've always wanted to somehow incorporate my learnings of the subconscious mind in helping people. And all these things started to kind of come to me. I'm like, I'm not doing the things that I should be doing in life. And it was in that moment where I'm like, something shifted. And I just remember laying down on a park bench and I was bawling my eyes out. It's almost bringing stuff up right now. I had to change my life in ways that would hurt people. And it was really, really hard. But I knew I had to do it for them and for myself.
Now, Nikki shares a powerful transformative moment in her life, which really was a turning point that reshaped her entire future. Now, she is a certified master practitioner of neuro-linguistic programming with a very profound understanding of the subconscious mind.
Every single emotion, we could go through every single emotion. And in my program, I actually have what's called a wheel of emotions, where people can practice feeling the neurochemical responses within them, where it's like there's subsets of anger, sadness, happiness. And you can feel every single one. Like, okay, think of a memory that makes you feel guilty, and you'll find it. And you'll see that it is distinct from everything else. And it's very familiar to you because you felt it most of your life, or since, that particular trauma took place.
Nikki opens up about her unique and practical techniques, like what she calls the wheel of emotions, providing ways to understand and reshape our emotional responses. We also explore using things like meditation and mindfulness to try and confront and release fears. So this episode offers very valuable insights on both personal growth and also practical tools for emotional self-awareness. So enjoy. So before we jump into today's episode, I'd like to introduce our sponsor, Jane, a clinic management software and EMR with a human touch. Whether you're switching your software or going paperless for the first time, the Jane team knows that the onboarding process, well, it can feel a little bit overwhelming. That's why with Jane, you don't just get a software, you really do get a whole team. Included in every Jane subscription is their award-winning customer support. Now, a lot of places will say award-winning customer support, but they really are amazing. And they're available by phone, email, and chat whenever you need, even Saturdays. You can also book a free account setup consultation to review your account and ensure you feel super confident about going live. And if you'd like some extra advice along the way, you can tap into the lovely community of practitioners, clinic owners, and front desk staff through Jane's community Facebook group. It's a solid group. So if you're interested in making the switch to Jane, head to jane.app/switch to book a one-on-one demo with a member of their support team. And if you choose to make the switch, don't forget to mention my code, which is AIM1MO. That's AIM, the number 1, MO, at the time of sign up for a 1-month grace period on your new Jane account. Well, Nikki, welcome, and thank you very much for taking the time to chat with me today. I'm looking forward to our conversation for many reasons, but first and foremost, what comes to mind is very specifically what you do within this idea of transformational coaching. And reading your bio and your website and all of the things that you talk about, it's like right up my alley, talking about the subconscious patterns and how they tend to strongly influence our behaviors and our actions and all these things. So I'm really, really excited about our conversation, and I'm hoping we could just jump right into it by maybe you could describe a little bit about what happened in your life. What was your aha moment in which you're like, I I think there's something going on in myself somewhere that's affecting the way my life is unfolding. Could you describe your aha moment, as it were?
Absolutely. Yeah. So for me, I've actually been studying the subconscious mind since 2007, quite obsessively. I got into it via Tony Robbins, listening to his audiobooks, and just fell in love with NLP, started studying it like crazy, like to the point where I would get courses online, like practitioner training courses, master practitioner courses, and I would go through them 10 times over because I just wanted more and more and more. And every round I went through, I just got more understanding, and it was just fascinating to me. And using all these methods in life, it was just like it was like magic. It was amazing. But it wasn't until I would say about 2017 when I did my first actually in person practitioner training for neurolinguistic programming, and then my master practitioner training, where it completely changed my life. It was hosted in Calgary, and it was just transformative because the entire time we were under trance. Like our teacher taught us through experiential learning. She would use hypnotherapy in order to make profound change within us throughout the process. And so as I was going throughout the process, I started noticing, I'm like something's happening inside of me. Like it was hard to explain. Kind of like when you have, like you're having a conversation or you're going through life and you have an aha moment, a realization, and you're just like,
Mhm.
oh my God, I see things completely differently now. And I had that about things in my life. And up until that point, I had lived my life like pretty conventionally. I had a great job, corporate job. I was actually married to an amazing man who we had been high school sweethearts. But I personally had the experience where I started to realize like almost like I wasn't living to the fullest in my life. And it's like, in order to stay in the places that I was in my life, I was making concessions, like out of fear, essentially. I was afraid to ever be on my own. I had grown up in a big family and then was with my husband. And it it was a great life, but I realized how terrified I was to be alone. And I'm like, I don't want to get to be 80 years old and like he passes away and then I'm all alone and then I have to deal with it then. And just all these fears of, like, I was in a corporate job and it was a great job, paid really well, like prestigious. But there was something in me that's like, I've always wanted to do entrepreneurial things. I've always wanted to somehow incorporate my learnings of the subconscious mind in helping people. And all these things started to kind of come to me. I'm like, I'm not doing the things that I should be doing in life. And it was in that course, in that moment where I'm like, something shifted. And I
Mhm.
remember actually going for a walk after my course ended one day. And I just remember laying down on a park bench and I was bawling my eyes out. It's almost bringing stuff up right now, but like, I was like, I realized I had to change my life in ways that would would hurt people. Whew. Um, and it was really, really hard. But I knew I had to do it for them and for myself. And so I made that change and completely did like a 180 of my life. And then I started going internal. I started to realize, holy crap, like there are fears in me. I had so much safety and stability and security in my life. And I was kind of counting on that in lieu of pursuing what I knew I should be doing, those dreams and
Mhm.
aspirations. And one of my biggest fears was being seen. So I
Mhm.
started doing workshops and stuff. And like, even this kind of thing, like it used to absolutely terrify me. But then suddenly I started like remembering all the tools that I had learned over the years through neurolinguistic programming and hypnotherapy. And I'm like, well, I know what to do in order to move forward. I just have to be willing to. So I did. So I started getting then into meditation and mindfulness and started implementing these techniques at a subconscious level that completely altered my perception of problems in my life, where it
Mhm.
was like, okay, these problems, they're problems right now, but as I kind of peel back the layers of the onion, I can find the root of what these problems are at a subconscious level within myself through, I'll talk about the neurochemical responses later, but basically how you sense the things or find the things within yourself in order to work on, got to the root of these issues and just used meditation and mindfulness to release and release and release and release. And it actually got to the point. So, uh, decided to move on from the relationship, decided to move on from my corporate job, which were both absolutely terrifying, but I
Mhm.
knew I had to do it. And then actually, it's funny. about 2 months prior to COVID starting, I decided I was going to self-isolate because I wanted to go into all my fears. I wanted to go into my fears of especially judgment because I had just left my corporate job. And people were like, "What are you doing? Aren't you gonna find another job? Aren't you gonna do this? Aren't you gonna do this?" And I'm like, "Nope, I'm just gonna sit and just feel stuff, just go into stuff." They're all like, "What?" So going into fear of judgment, going into all the things I was terrified of. And so literally for about a year and a half, I spent 10 plus hours a day meditating and just releasing. And that experience is what showed me how to release other people's stuff because we're all the same at a subconscious level, no matter what the problem is. Like people come to me and they'll be like, "Oh, I have this problem. Like I'm kind of embarrassed about talking about it because fear of judgment and all this stuff." And I'm like, "You literally have nothing to worry about because
Mm.
A, I've probably been through something similar. And B, it has nothing to do with you as a person. It just has to do with the subconscious patterns you picked up along the way. And it's basically just what experience have you had in the past that can be labeled by a potential trauma. And it's just a high impact negative experience where you had really intense emotions come up and it stuck with you in your nervous system. And now it's dictating how you are behaving in life. That's all it is. It has nothing to do with the person. So
Mhm.
anyway, long story short, that's essentially my story about how I got to this point is 2017. I flipped my life around and then coming to make the program that I'm making or that I've made and that I am working with people on is people who are going through big life transitions or big challenges in life where they have intense emotions, intense fear about what they're going to do to move forward with their life, or just any kind of transition, helping them along that path because I've been through it myself and I know exactly what it's like. And I also have the tools and resources to show them and teach them how to remove their own subconscious blocks that are hindering them from moving forward. So yeah, I hope that was a good answer.
It was, yeah. It's there's a lot of areas of entry into deepening our conversation. A few things stood out to me. One of which is talking about this idea of transition and transformation. These are both topics that I'm absolutely fascinated by. I've told this story before, but it's one of my favorites to tell, so I'm going to tell it again. Which is, I was quite young. I must have been 16, 15, 16 at the time, and I remember thinking to myself, transitions are the worst. It's the transitional phases in life. And what, because I'm a teenager, it's not like I'm some profound philosopher, is I didn't want to get out of bed. That was it. I'm a teenager now, and I'm thinking like I enjoy being in bed and I enjoy not being in bed, but getting out of bed is the worst. And then the same thing. Like I was not in the shower, and I'm like, I don't want to get into the shower because that moment of being out of the shower and getting in, that's the worst. It's like weird, it's cold and it's hot. So it's these moments in between, and even as a teenager, I'm starting to get these insights. It's like these blips of transitions are so challenging. And then of course, as life moves on and things happen in life, you realize that like there's a lot of transitions, and they pretty much are always pretty crappy. Like they're just not enjoyable. Um, but they also make up a huge part of our life. So I'm curious to dig into that aspect. That's one thing. And another thing is this idea of transformation, which I so strongly believe that word transformation is in itself a powerful word. When we use that term transformation as opposed to anything else we could say like a crisis or a shift or something like that, like all these other are a pivot, right? There's a lot of words that are fine, but I really enjoy the transformation one. So and then there's a million things I want to talk to you about the subconscious, but maybe we could dig first into this idea of transitions because it sounds like yours was very impactful. And from my understanding of the program that you've developed, it is really about individuals in these transitional phases.
Mhm.
So if we were to pick like some low-hanging fruit in the world of transitions, somebody's on the verge, they're on the cusp, but they're like, should I, shouldn't I? But I probably should. What are some of the first things a person can do as they move into a conscious transition? Let's not talk about the find yourself in a transition, like make the choice to move into these transitional phases. What are some of the things a person could do as they move into that sort of ease the process in your opinion?
hmm So as you're actually speaking, you're talking about the transition, like even just a transition of going into the shower. Obviously, like I work with people with bigger transitions, but this is a prime example of how you would kind of understand what's going on at a subconscious level as you are wanting to transition. So. Okay, so I don't know if this will work because if you're not in the situation, but is there something in life that you maybe want to do, but you haven't done yet?
Oh, gracious. I mean, that's a pretty tricky question to ask me because I'm kind of one of those people who's like, you know what I want to do, and then I do it. So
Yeah.
let me mull it. What's something that I want to do? Well, kind of. Yeah, I mean, I'm in the process of a transition. So, of course, I've got my continuing education company in which I largely focus on teaching technical skills to practitioners. Fine, valuable, but my passion, the thing that I enjoy doing the most is dealing with, well, what we're talking about in this conversation, inner work, self-development, that sort of soft skill, inner stuff that practitioners need, in my opinion, to be really successful. So if we talk about a transition, that's a transition I'm right in the middle of, is transitioning from a successful company teaching hard skills to a who knows what kind of company teaching soft skills.
hmm Okay, so what I do is I kind of find where that gap is. What is a subconscious pattern that may be inhibiting that progress forward? So the way that I go about it is I will talk to people through their sensations in their body, their neurochemical response. So to give you an idea. So say you have a traumatic experience in your past. So say this is a traumatic experience. I know listeners can't see this, but I'm just using my hands to indicate. So if this is a traumatic experience in your past, as this experience happens, simultaneously, you create a memory of that experience in your mind, which also creates a new neurosynaptic pathway. And at the same time, you create a neurochemical response in your body. And so the way that I like to explain neurochemical responses is if you think about, for example, right now, think about the happiest moment of your entire life or a really, really, really happy moment, if you can think of one now.
Hmm.
So
Yep, pretty
now
easy.
perfect. Some people have trouble. So
Yeah,
perfect. So when you think about that happy experience, where do you feel the happiness in your body?
right. Yeah. Yeah, it's usually in my cheeks, a little bit in my chest, but I'd say the majority is in my cheeks. So
Perfect. And so what I do is I try to define that as much as possible. So if you could give that a color, what color would it be?
purple.
Purple. That's amazing.
Hmm.
It's normally not purple, so I love hearing a different color. And then is it a heavy feeling or a light feeling?
Ooh, heavy or light? I mean, it's definitely light. Yeah, out of those
Okay.
two.
Okay. And
Mhm.
is it like tingling? Is it moving? Any other sensations?
Nothing is immediately present as far as other sensations, I wouldn't say.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
So that is just an example of how you are subconsciously coding that sensation. So whenever we have an experience in our lives, if it's a positive experience, we'll get a good feeling. And that will prompt us to move towards that when something similar comes up in the future. If it's a negative experience, a trauma, for example, like say someone calls you a name when you're little, then you will, anytime you have the potential of having that same kind of experience come up, that will prompt that neurochemical response of negativity to pop up in your body, telling you internally, do not go that way, which is what
Mhm.
hinders people. So, when you think about this transition that you're about to, or that you are going through, when you think about getting to that transition, wanting to be in the end state of that transition, where do you feel a negative resonance in your body, or do you feel any?
All right. So if I'm imagining myself in at the end of this transition, everything is as I would imagine it to be. Where do I feel resistance?
Or so more so not having it done, but like as you are in this present moment and you think about wanting it to be done, do you feel anything telling you you have doubt within you or maybe another negative emotion stopping you from moving forward?
I would say the closest I can experience sort of an embodied sensation is fatigue, lethargy,
Mm,
maybe would be it.
okay.
Mhm.
Okay. So that lethargy, where do you feel that?
Whole body, whole body.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like
And
a
is
slowing down.
slowing down. And if you had to give it a
Mm.
color, what color would it be?
No, would be, huh, kind of dark orange.
Okay. Yeah, see, it's random colors, hey?
Yeah,
Uh,
totally.
so I'm curious. I could go through the different motions of specifying what it's like, but I'm just curious because you had said about getting into the shower, for example. When you think back to wanting to get in the shower, where do you feel the resistance there, like as a teenager?
Mhm. Yeah, that's definitely shoulders, that's tightening.
Shoulders.
Yeah.
So I further define that and clarify that for the client where it's like, okay, so if there's an emotion tied to that feeling, like the shoulders, what is the emotion? And then it's like essentially clarifying at a subconscious level, how are you being prompted to not move forward in the ways that you want to? Because consciously,
Right.
we're only 5%. We're 95% subconscious. And so
Mm,
if that 95% doesn't want you to move forward, even though you have the intention to do so, then you're not going to like 5% against 95%. That's not going to happen. So it's really just about clarifying and defining the levels of the patterns. And then again, peeling back the onion,
yeah.
because some emotions are there to cover up and protect us from feeling the hurt underneath. And I find that very common in our society because
Mhm.
when we are angry, we get to be strong, we get to be certain, we get to be just powerful, really. And when we have a hurt, we're not typically wanting to feel that hurt, but the hurt is what we need to feel in order to release whatever is needing to be released, so we stop hindering ourselves.
Mhm.
Hope that clarified things.
It did, and something that you said in there, I love talking about, and I'm very curious to hear your description and explanation on it. It's this idea of 5% conscious, 95% unconscious. Actually, let's move in a slight different direction and then get there because I think some definitions are in order.
For sure.
The terms conscious, subconscious, unconscious, collective unconscious, like there's a lot of these words that are very commonly used.
Mhm.
But I think what would be helpful before we start to get into this description of 5% conscious, 95% unconscious is maybe we can define those two terms first. So
Yeah.
when you describe somebody being conscious, 5% conscious, what is that?
So it's basically the thoughts that you are aware of, that you're consciously aware of, and that you consciously control, like the
Mhm,
logical mind, like thinking, rationalizing, analyzing, that kind of thing. The
mhm,
subconscious, and it can be used interchangeably. I know some people, like my NLP instructor changed from using the term subconscious. She thought unconscious was more all encompassing. So, and I
mhm.
know there are different levels depending on the modality you're using. I just like to simplify it for people as much as possible, subconscious and conscious. But
Mhm.
essentially, the subconscious mind, in my terms, is whatever you're not consciously aware of or don't have conscious control over. And like, for example, if you're driving from point A to point B, and as you're driving, you're so in your head that you don't even realize that you're driving. Like you get to point
Mhm.
B and you're like, oh my God, I just drove this entire way and I didn't even realize it. So that's because you were unconscious here while your consciousness was in your head. So
Yeah.
that's just being in a state of trance, essentially.
Mhm. Yeah. The driving trance.
Yes.
Classic. Okay. Okay, so we've got our definitions of conscious and we've got our definition of subconscious. I like that. I think this is a good place to move forward from. So with that in mind, this idea that on an average day we operate 5% conscious, meaning 5% throughout our day, we're really only 5% aware of what we're doing. So maybe another way of saying it is the vast majority of our actions, behaviors, interactions are driven by things that we are not aware of and we haven't chosen. Our
Mhm.
reactions, even the words we choose, perhaps, are articulated from this place outside of our conscious awareness. Is that a fair assessment of what it
Absolutely.
is? Yeah.
Absolutely. And I really like you saying even the words we choose because that's very true. Like if you think about having a conversation with someone you're intimidated by, you're going to be holding back, but you're holding back because there's something in you and you don't know what stopping you from or maybe causing you to trip over your words.
Mhm.
So it really does dictate thoughts, behaviors, actions, every area of our
Yeah.
life.
So then, as part of the work you do, which I understand you sort of shining a light on these subconscious behaviors, but is part of it teaching people how to identify these subconscious behaviors and then giving them the tools to modify it, change it? So what's the work you do when it comes to working with these subconscious patterns.
Yeah, so that's exactly it. Is I teach people, so I do one-off sessions, like sessions where I say remove it for them. But essentially, what I'm doing is I'm helping them to get clear on and uncover again those layers of the onion, peel back the layers, so that they can find the root of what's going on within them at a subconscious level. An example I like to use is there was somebody who I actually met him on an airplane. He was fascinated by NLP, so I'm like, well, let me do a process on you. So he thought he didn't have enough motivation. I asked him for a problem that he wanted to work on. So he's like, "Well, I can't get myself to go to the gym." So he said that he had no motivation to go to the gym. And I ended up saying, like, we were kind of peeling back the layers of the onion, and it turns out it had nothing to do with motivation. He had been married to a woman for years and years, but she ended up in a wheelchair having a disability, and he loved her more than anything. He used to go to the gym all the time before they were married, and he was quite built. But he had been taking care of her quite extensively for years. And when we peeled back the layers, it turns out he actually wasn't going to the gym because he was scared that if he went to the gym and started to look better, that women there would start noticing him, and that could lead to something he didn't want to happen because he loved his wife so much. So him coming in and thinking the problem is lack of motivation, just like everyone does about going to the gym, right? It's like, why can't I
Mhm.
go? And I find this with the gym quite often with people is it's not what you think. Sometimes it's a
Yeah.
matter of I don't want to go outside into the cold because that's uncomfortable. So I'm trying to avoid the cold, not the gym. So it's just a matter of literally peeling back the onion, finding those
Yeah.
layers, and then uncovering, essentially bringing the unconscious to your conscious awareness.
Yeah.
And so,
Mhm.
yes, so I use different techniques myself in order to illuminate that for people, but then also teach them how to do it themselves and how not only to find. I go typically in through emotion or the
Mhm.
sensation, the neurochemical response, but then there's also different methods with hypnotherapy, conversational hypnosis, which, you use metaphor quite often. Because, for example, have you ever been in the middle of a conversation where two people are talking and they can't figure out what each other are saying and they're just not aligned until suddenly a metaphor gets popped up and it's like, I get it now,
Mhm.
because that's another language to speak to the subconscious mind through.
Yeah.
So it's just knowing the different ways to talk to the subconscious mind, which is not typically what people are trained to do. We're trained to logically rationalize and compute every little thing, but you're using the 5% conscious mind then. And that's why you're not getting the results, is because you have to go into the subconscious parts, which is mostly emotion, and just kind of witnessing how you're doing what you're doing at that subconscious level. NLP kind of shows you how you are interacting with your thoughts, like how you're subconsciously coding it at a visual level, even, or at an auditory level, or how are you doing what you're doing to get the process to what it needs to be to take action in the way you want to, and how many hiccups are there along the way, essentially.
Mhm. Mhm. I think it's such an unbelievably valuable process. I studied NLP and hypnotherapy when I was in my second year of acupuncture school. And when people ask me, so it was 4 years to get my doctorate degree in acupuncture. And they said, what was your favorite part? And I said, studying NLP and hypnosis. They're like, oh, that's
Cool.
part of acupuncture. I said, nope, totally separate program. Uh, out of all the things I learned in those 4 years, that was genuinely one of the most impactful set of skills I learned to help me as a practitioner. Just simply understanding how to communicate to deeper aspects of one's consciousness. So
Hmm.
with that, I'm curious, like, what are some simple techniques that maybe we can help any listeners? Because a lot of the listeners, they are practitioners of various modalities, not necessarily coaching. What are some easy NLP techniques that we can use? Maybe we should define that as well. But what are some easy NLP techniques maybe that you could suggest that anybody could incorporate into their communication styles to sort of relieve some of these communication blockages and help understand these unconscious or subconscious motivations?
Okay. I was thinking about, okay, let me just think on how to approach this one. So, what I was going to say is something that can help them within themselves if they
Mhm.
are feeling a negative emotion. So, So just to give you context as to how this has been beneficial in my life, this is actually the very first technique I give to clients, or anybody for that matter, because it's so simple. It's a meditative technique. So it's an old Hawaiian prayer called Ho'oponopono. And it's actually been repurposed for its use in a meditation. So essentially what it is if, okay, so when I used this the very first time, I was I was at that corporate job and I was terrified to speak in meetings. Like I would be silent. And the entire time I'd be like, oh my God, I feel stupid because I'm silent. Or, oh my God, they're gonna think I'm stupid. Or, oh, I should have said what they said. I knew that answer. Blah. It comes from my past in like elementary school when I was scared to speak up. So I had that. And I know that you have to feel into, or you can feel into the neurochemical responses within you. So I started to pay attention in those meetings to where I was feeling that negative resonance within me, that negative neurochemical response. I felt it right in my solar plexus, just below my chest. And so I had just learned this technique, Ho'oponopono, and I was like, okay, I'm going to try this out. So for 2 days, literally in the meetings, I would sit there, obviously still paying attention to the meetings, but I would sit there. And what the technique is when you feel a negative resonance that's holding you back, you feel it, you put all of your attention on it, because the reason that those negative resonances are there, those negative feelings are there, is to tell you something from a subconscious level. And you have to uncover that. But also, if you have a trauma from your past, it's important to kind of, I guess, rebalance it out. Because if you think about a trauma in your past, like my trauma of being in elementary school and getting picked on or not wanting to speak up because of that, if someone in that moment, a loved one or a friend, had come to me and just made me feel better, feel like, given me love in some way, like it's okay, you're fine, just do what you need to do, and kind of amp you up and make you feel okay, then you can get to the point of speaking up potentially if you're spoken to in the right way that resonates with you. But I didn't have that, so it stuck with me for years. So as an adult, I was feeling this negative feeling. And so to rebalance it out, from a subconscious level, you're using emotion to balance out emotion. So what I tell people to do is feel the negative resonance and balance it out with love. So you can say these phrases to the emotion is I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, and thank you. And just keep saying those to the feeling, and you will notice that this feeling will shift and possibly dissipate. If it doesn't dissipate, you pick one of those phrases and then you focus that phrase. So for me in this instance, it was the words I love you. So in those meetings, I was just saying over and over, I love you, I love you, I love you, to this negative feeling. And memories of my past, my elementary school, childhood trauma would come up. And here I'm saying, I love you, and almost getting teary eyed. And it was funny because nobody knew I was doing it in the meeting, but it was very profound for me. And within 2 days, that feeling went away. And that was the first time I'd realized how powerful this was. And I, from that point on, was like an all-star in my meetings. I never second guessed myself. I always just said what I needed to say. I was a completely different person, and everyone took notice. And then I started leading meetings from that point on and started doing project management, which is the next step up in my evolution at that job. So it was really, really, really powerful. So just simple things, and it sounds really, really like almost too simple, but it really is. You're balancing out the subconscious side. You're balancing out one emotion with the other, kind of filling that negative, horrible feeling with the positive feeling. So yeah.
My experience has been relatively similar insofar as that the subconscious mind is shockingly simple, but simultaneously very complex, right? Like that's the weird
Hmm.
paradox of it, is the techniques that seem to be so effective at dealing with these subconscious programs and these deeper wounds and traumas. They tend to be theoretically very, very simple. A simple phrase, a simple movement, whatever it might be, with profound effects. And of course, the conscious mind thrives in complexity. So it's like, no, 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 wait. Nothing that feels this big can be that simple. It
Hmm.
must require 30 years of unpacking it through talk therapy or whatever it might be. Don't get me wrong, there's value to talk therapy, but what I do appreciate about what you said is it seems seemingly simple, and it is. And that's one of the beautiful things about how working with these
Hmm.
deeper aspects of self can be, is
Hmm.
simplicity. particularly when it comes to those positive emotions like love and gratitude, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why oftentimes I just had a client say to me the other day, we got to the second session and he's like, "So is this it? Like this is all it takes? I've been working on my like depression for years and years and this is all it takes?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And that was
Hmm.
my frustration too back in 2017 when I was looking up shadow work, which is essentially the same exact thing, but when I looked up shadow work, it was like I was trying to find out exactly what it meant, how to do it, and essentially it's just removing the trauma from within yourself and same kind of thing, clearing out all the subconscious blocks. But I remember just being blown away. I'm like, nobody is giving proper information that I'm finding. It's all overly convoluted, or it's just what's the word? It's lacking. It's not
Hmm.
complete, or it's overly complicated. So it is simple. It's you just most people are so focused on the doubt that it could work, or like you say, intellectualizing and just trying to figure it out, that that's where their energy goes instead of just doing the work, which is so easy, and and they'll see the results essentially.
And when you mention shadow work, I mean, again, this is an area that I could happily dive deep into. But what came up as you mentioned that for me is this idea that in the world of coaching, there's a lot of things like shadow work. There's a lot of these kind of buzzwords, right? And I'm curious, in your experience of being in the industry, what are some common misconceptions, or what are some things you see in the coaching world that perhaps are preventing people from getting results, or that are maybe overly hyped but not necessarily that effective? I'm not sure if I'm articulating the question well, but
Mhm.
yeah, if that makes sense.
Well, I did one thing recently with some coaches, and it was about limiting beliefs, and it's like they had a paper, and it was like, "Hey, what are your limiting beliefs?" It was asking, and then it's just like, "Okay, well, come up with statements that counter those limiting beliefs," and it kind of just went on that same tangent, and I found no benefit in it because it's like, well, I don't feel that it's getting to the root of anything. It's like if I have a conversation, "What's wrong with you?" "Oh, this is wrong with me." "Okay, well tell me about why it's wrong with you and like how would you like to be better?" And it's like, "Well, that's great, but you're not going deeper." Like for me myself, I've always kind of had a hard time, and I know that other people have a hard time too with this. It's like when you're doing it yourself, there are certain aspects, there are certain emotions within you that you do not want to feel. And you will do anything at a subconscious level to bounce out and not feel them. So I find like when I'm doing sessions with clients is that we'll be doing work and we'll be going deeper, deeper, deeper into the heart of the emotion that they need to get to. And they'll be like, "Oh yeah," and they'll go off on this tangent of conversation, or, "Oh, I wonder if this is why," and they'll try to rationalize why they're having the emotion. And I'm like, "No, go back and feel the emotion because you're literally just bouncing out, distracting yourself so that you don't have to feel it." They're like, "Oh," so they go back. And then
Mhm.
10 minutes later, "Oh, okay, now do it again." Like it's and
Yeah.
I do the exact same thing because we are our own worst enemy when it comes to that, is that if I don't want to feel an emotion, I'm going to try to prevent myself from feeling it. So that's why it's really important to have somebody who holds you accountable in those ways and can see it as it's taking place.
Yeah.
Also, when there's doubt, same thing. If you're doubting, like if you're doubting a process as it's taking place, all of your attention is on the thoughts of doubt. So even if you're focusing on actually, going into the process, it's like, "Oh, well, what if this is not real? What if this is woo woo?" And I had that same thing when I was first starting all these things till I started seeing that it worked. But when you focus on doubt, when you focus on, "Oh, is this going to get me anything?" When you start again
Mhm.
intellectualizing, rationalizing, then it inhibits you from actually getting the results that you need.
When I was taking my hypnotherapy training, we had I think it was called the contract, which isn't an actual contract. Well, it's essentially these agreements that the you and the client make together prior to engaging in a hypnotherapy session, and one of which was really talking about this idea of doubt. And it is so unbelievably potent. And during a hypnotherapy session, I'm sure you found the same thing. How obvious even a sliver of doubt is, like the
Hmm.
idea try, I'll try. Well, what if somebody says, "Hey, do you want to come to my place on Friday?" And they say, "Oh, I'll try." We all know
Yeah.
exactly what that means,
Yeah.
right?
Totally.
So these little tiny doubt-based words, man, they make such a big difference. So when you have somebody and you're working with somebody and you sense this doubt or this "I'll try" mentality, what are things that you do to sort of belief, like not maybe this will work, but no, I'm committed and this is going to be effective.
Hmm. In those cases, I usually just call it out, and we typically tend to map that back because that doubt is coming from a place just like anything else. And you peel the onion back and you find the root, and then you remove that, and then it's like, oh, okay, I see now. Mostly just give counter examples of, okay, try this, or again, like, for every single emotion, we could go through every single emotion, and in my program, I actually have what's called a wheel of emotions, where people can practice feeling the neurochemical responses within them, where it's like there's subsets of anger, sadness, happiness, and you can feel every single one. Like, okay, think of a memory that makes you feel guilty, and you'll find it. And you'll see that it is distinct from everything else. And it's very familiar to you because you felt it most of your life, or since, that
Mhm.
particular trauma took place. So it's really just like, I know that everything I'm saying, I am literally pacing their experience as I am speaking, and they can't deny that. And then when they start to see the results, they really can't deny that. So, and honestly, that was a big part of what took me so long to go full time with my coaching practice, is because I had the fear within me of, well, what if people don't think it's real? What if they don't believe it'll work? What if, what if, what if? And it's like, well, you know what? I can't help that beyond what I can do, like of what I've just said, and I can just give
Mhm.
my honest experience and pace exactly what I'm seeing, and people will see. And if they're not ready yet, they're not ready yet, and that's fine. They're at their
Mhm.
place in life, but I just try to give as much as I can to illuminate and explain and show what's really happening behind the scenes, because I think honestly this stuff should be taught in school. That was my first thing I ever said about NLP. I'm like, this should be taught in school. I don't know why it
Yeah.
isn't, but yeah,
It's
that's
like an operator's manual, isn't it? It's like this is how,
yeah.
to the best of our awareness at this point in time in history, this is how we understand how the psyche works. But what I really like about NLP too is, um, don't get me wrong, I'm a huge Jungian, like love the Jungian approach to psychology, beautiful. But gosh, like you got to invest years of your life to understand one sentence of that.
Right?
Not very approachable, right? But something about NLP is it's like, okay, let's just, we don't need to worry about all the technical stuff. And sure, we could do a bunch of controlled trials to prove it, but at the end of the day, here's our observations of how the mind works and how things work. So it gives individuals a language. Now, what I personally found so beautiful about it, and it was kind of cool that my studies coincided, was studying TCM NLP, was the overlap between Eastern philosophies, which of course have been around for a long time, and this new NLP system. And
Mhm.
the overlaps are profound. Earlier
Yeah.
in our conversations, in our conversation, you described that you've spent a lot of time in meditation and doing mindfulness and things like this. So I'm curious, in your experience, how do these two things complement each other, or do they complement each other when we talk about
Mhm.
Eastern philosophies, Taoism, Buddhism, and NLP?
Absolutely. It's absolutely fascinating, and not even just these modalities, but so many things in life. Look at quantum physics and, well, spirituality in general, but everything, it's almost just like everything is a fractal of other things. Everything is just a different form of how to understand something else. It's like universal math. It is so
Hmm.
fascinating. So when you go into meditation, like, so if you have the basis of understanding with NLP, it's about how your thoughts and behaviors interact essentially at a subconscious level. So, for example, it'll say if you have a certain negative thought, then you're going to code that differently than a positive thought. Kind of like how you code neurochemically the positive feeling versus the negative feeling. But positive and negative thoughts are the same kind of thing. where is the thought? Is the thought a picture, or is it still, or sorry, is it a movie? Um, different thoughts will have, auditory aspects to it, maybe olfactory or gustatory, so taste or smell. Everything is coded in a very specific way. But when you actually go into meditation, you start to see those things and you quiet the logical mind so that the subconscious mind can take over. And you start to pay attention. Oh, they're right. This is how I'm doing this. And then you start to look at every single thought or every single emotion and you see, okay, this emotion is prompting this thought, and it's prompting this thought for this reason. And it really is just awareness, which gets into Buddhism, Taoism, all that, and non-duality. Like, it's all just sensation. Everything is just a sense, like whether it's visual, kinesthetic, auditory, that kind of thing. It's like, it really is just different ways of structuring information, in like the same information in different ways. And really, all those Eastern philosophies they just give you a means to kind of play with those tools. Whereas NLP, it kind of breaks everything down into almost like logical forms of
Mhm.
how to utilize it, which is why some practitioners aren't able to get to the same levels of capability to remove the patterns, is because if they stay into the intellectual side of things, where it's like, okay, here's a process. If I do this with the person, then this will happen. But you need to flow with how they're experiencing it and know what's going on within them as it's going on within them. So very, very interesting how they all interconnect like that.
Yeah. Yeah, when you say flow, I personally found in this, I talk about flow all the time in the world of practice. I really think no matter what type of modality an individual is practicing, being in flow, it makes everything so much better. And when I was first starting practice hypnotherapy, of course, I had my scripts and I had like, this is the process and here's the deepener. And, I'm reading from it and it was fine. Everything was good. I had some pretty good success with the whole process and I enjoyed it. But then after doing it for like 10 years or something like that, like I don't even remember last time I looked at a script. I don't even
Yeah.
ask what somebody's coming in for anymore. Like I
Yeah.
will, but I whatever. It's when they get in
Yeah.
there, it's working with what's present. And the flow state that happens when I, as a practitioner, can drop into those deep meditative states and
Mm-hmm.
facilitate this process.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, the change that occurs. But I found
Yeah.
I can only do that personally, help facilitate that change if I'm willing to go there myself, if I'm
Yeah.
willing to lead into these deeper places of
Yeah.
stillness, which for me has come through many, many hours of sitting in meditation and doing mindfulness and fostering as high a degree of self-awareness as I am capable of at this moment, which is
Mhm.
never where I want it to be, but
There's always more, but if there wasn't, it wouldn't be very exciting.
exactly, exactly. Yeah. So with your program that you've developed, right? Could you tell me a little bit about how that works?
Yeah, so it's essentially made for people who are going through those big life transitions, because I know after my experience, a lot shifted and I felt unbelievable intense emotions. So essentially,
Hmm.
there are four stages that people can go through as they're going through a life transition. The pre-transition, where they're like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, I am terrified. I'm holding on to my old life. I know I should go into my new life, but I am absolutely terrified. So I spent years in that phase and thinking, why would I want to change it? Society has told me that this is what, the ultimate thing to have. So why would I want to change it? But knowing that for some reason within you, you need to change. And then the post change, where you have unbelievable emotions coming up and need to know how to deal with them. And also the negative self talk and all that kind of stuff that takes place as you're, you know, changing friends, changing relationships, embarking on this new journey that is just all on you, essentially. And then, so essentially in the program, those two phases are focused on releasing whatever problems the person has in their life. So releasing whatever their challenges are. So for example, like we were talking about your transition, it wasn't like a problem, but say you were going through a transition and you had doubt in your mind and you thought maybe you had inadequacy issues, you had feelings of I don't matter, or it's not going to work, or how can I ever do it? So my program addresses those and pinpoints and peels back the onion on finding the root of whatever is causing those to come up in you. And so after we remove whatever's hindering the person from essentially getting into the life that they're moving towards and wanting, their dream life, then it's about remapping things. So mapping out. So this gets into my project management and Scrum background. So in corporate, I did project management for digital, like for web campaigns and like marketing campaigns and digital web development, stuff like that. So taking my project management background, essentially we look at where are you now, where do you want to be, and how do you get there? And then we look at, imposter syndrome. That's probably going to come up once you get there. Or that insurmountable list of tasks and overwhelm and stress and maybe communication with people and relationships. How do I find a relationship, whatever it might be? So just tackling all those little pieces that need to be in place for you to flow smoothly to that transition point where you are getting into your dream life, and then where you're in it and you feel fully confident and comfortable in it and like you're capable of doing what you need to do when you get there. So it's kind of just a blend of all of those things, like interpersonal communication, mindset, understanding. Most people have really big challenges with negative thoughts because, again, that's all just the subconscious mind. You have that neurochemical response and it prompts your thoughts to spiral, mostly because you don't want to feel what you don't want to feel. But yeah, so there's that. There's relationship with self, relationship with others. I find that people like me are the ones who are typically going through my program, and it's like there's the people pleasing aspect, the putting others before yourself, not necessarily respecting your boundaries or even putting up boundaries, maintaining boundaries, stuff like that. So, and then confidence to move forward as well. So essentially in my program, I just teach people what's what within them, what's happening at a given moment, and how to get past it. And then I teach them specifically how to use specific tools in understanding their consciousness so that they are empowered and feel empowered to move forward even after the program is over. Yeah, just getting to that level where they're essentially in the life that they want to live and happy with it.
I appreciate the comprehensiveness. I've worked with a number of coaches, and I have nothing bad to say about any of them. They've all been very phenomenal, and one of the things that all of them have in common is a similar comprehensive approach. One thing, as I was going through some of the training I took on coaching, particularly life coaching, specifically life coaching, was very precise tools in order to accomplish goals. Unbelievably valuable, like unbelievably valuable. But without, as you do, dealing with these subconscious inhibitors to those goals, then no matter how amazing the goal setting system and how much accountability is, without first off at least shining a flashlight onto these more subconscious aspects, it's pretty hard to keep moving forward. So I certainly appreciate the comprehensiveness of your program. I'm conscious of the time here, so if you're interested, I'd love to ask you one question that I ask everybody, and it's this deep curiosity that I have, and it has to do with being a practitioner. So, in your experience, both as somebody who's a practitioner, which I think coaching is a phenomenal practice, and I'm sure as somebody who's also been to many different practitioners, what do you think makes a practitioner successful? And it could be as specific or as broad as you would like.
I would say care is number one.
Mm.
You have to care. Otherwise, what's driving you essentially? Well, yeah.
Mhm.
But also genius, because the thing that like obsessiveness to the point of genius, where it's like my NLP instructor, I would call her a genius 100%, Anita Kozlowski from Calgary. Like I had taken, like I said, I had taken NLP courses and like 10 times over. And I remember as I was about to go into her program, I'm like, well, I've already taken it. Why would I, like, the reason I wanted to was because it was in person. But I'm like, why would I take it aside from that it's in person? But I decided to, and I'm so glad I did. Because again, being in that in person environment, she shifted my entire world.
Mhm.
And and she taught the principles. And I think that is probably the key, is in those audio versions of those practitioner training and master practitioner training. Yes, I learned about NLP. I learned about all the different, submodalities, modalities, all the language patterns, all that kind of stuff, how it all works. But she really dug it down into the principles where you can apply it to anything and everything, and you're not just waiting to use a specific technique. And so I find that really important also in teaching, where it's like, teach people so that they can do it themselves and they're empowered to, instead of relying only on, ones or certain techniques or something like that. But then also the care aspect, I think that's probably the most important, and not judgmental, because again,
Mhm.
people are people, and nobody wants to feel bad about something that they're trying to get rid of in the first place, that, it's just not right. So I would say
Mhm.
those things for sure.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Thank you. And as we draw our conversation to a close, is there anything else that you feel we didn't talk about that you'd really love to dig into, or something you feel that we didn't cover in enough depth?
I don't think so. I think
Wonderful.
this was a really great conversation. Yeah, yeah.
It sure
I
was. That's
I think
great.
we touched, I'll
Yeah.
probably get done and then I'll be like, "Oh, damn, I should have said this." But no, I think
Well,
this
that's
was
okay.
really, really, yeah, really, really
Cool.
good, and really, really nice to talk to you. Yeah,
Yeah, likewise, likewise. And of course, I'm going to leave all of your contact information in the show notes. So if anybody is interested in working with you or learning more about what you do, they'll find all of the links to all the places and spaces that you thrive in your online world, and they can reach out there.
perfect. Thank you so much. This was
Awesome.
really, really nice.
Oh, truly my pleasure. And thank you.